This is the history of communism. In 1777 France, the French government has been pretty satisfied with their recent victory with the American Revolution, and a philosopher living there named Victor de Huppé is writing a book which will coin the phrase communism. At the time, the monarchies in Europe didn't consider communism seriously because communism would damage their social rank, and the rulers of those monarchs would not live the expensive lives that they were used to. So de Huppé gets glossed over, until a man with big ideas and a long beard meets another man with big ideas and a long beard to spread their socialist thoughts to the world in the 1880s. And this sparks attention. They write a book titled The Communist Manifesto, and it explains how an overthrowing of a capitalist government would bring about the change needed for the gentle laborers of the world to not suffer. Marx and Engels become well-known politicians because of it, and someone's reading that book. It's Vladimir Lenin. Lenin was a revolutionary for communism since 1893, and he joined a Marxist circle. He was charged with sedition, and he was sentenced to 3 years in a Siberian prison without a trial. Lenin later wrote a book called What Is to Be Done, with many similarities to the book that Marx and Engels wrote 2 decades earlier. In writing this book did he get the name Lenin. It was a pseudonym replacing his actual name, Ulyanov. Now there's a war. World War I was a long and gruesome one, and it demonstrated the harsh living conditions for soldiers at the time. With supplies running short during the war, countries struggled economically, and it looked as if anywhere, any time, there would be a socialist or communist revolution. It happened in Russia in 1917. For the Russians, a revolution was getting more probable. The Germans actually assisted Lenin in his actions, hoping that it would occupy the Russian provisional government during the war, which he was fighting against. Lenin organized marches and riots all over Russia, and the most successful being the October Revolution. The Winter Palace was burned down, and the Tsar, who faced heavy criticism from Marxists, was overthrown and killed. Because of his popularity among communists, Lenin was placed as the dictator of the newly formed USSR. The death count of people executed by Lenin was quite high. Well, Lenin's health was rapidly decreasing by that time, so he needed to find a successor. Since Lenin cannot personally choose the next leader of the Soviet Union, he would promote one. His choices were Stalin, who he agreed with politically, or Trotsky, who was a friend of Lenin. Well, Trotsky was an anarchist, so he took his chances with Stalin. And his promotion of Stalin was enough to make him the next leader of the Soviet Union. In the 20s and 30s, not a lot happened historically, just a lot of death and purges and starvations and death. And even though Russia, Africa, and Eastern Europe adapted communism, the party wasn't at its peak yet. And there's another war. Yes, this one has a twist. Germany now wants to make an alliance with Stalin in conquering Europe, even though in the First World War Germany invaded Russia and they looked as if they were going to do it again. Stalin surprisingly signs the treaty. That cost Russia enormously. Well, said Stalin, never mind Germany now, we have small countries to invade. So he pushed up the Baltic states, conquering Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and parts of northern Romania. Then he tried with Finland in the Winter War, and that ended up as a very big failure. Surprisingly, the small country of Finland were able to hold up the mighty Soviet Union. And now, Russia was even less prepared to fight Germany. In a move only surprising to Stalin, the German armies advanced up the Soviet borders, and they even got in sight of Moscow. But due to bad timing and a cold winter and a lack of supplies, the Soviet Union pushed them back, and eventually won the war. Stalin took many small Eastern European countries in the negotiation table for the fate of post-war Europe, and built a wall dividing communist rule and capitalist rule that we now refer to as the Berlin Wall. Stalin's eyes wandered east as well, and the Red Army started liberating North Korea. Kim Il-sung wanted to get his hands on a communist dictatorship, and he moved in rankings rapidly. First he was a commander of the Red Army, then the leader of the Communist Party in North Korea, and in June of 1946, he was the one and only leader of North Korea. And China does not want to miss out on this new party. China was absolutely devastated after the constant invasions from the Imperial Japanese, and they wanted change. A brave revolutionary named Mao Zedong managed to take control of China successfully, and he ended up as one of the most murderous dictators in world history. He made a four-pest campaign which killed the sparrows because they eat wheat. But that messed up the food chain, and now China has a famine that killed over 50 million people. The Soviet Union now has a new leader named Khrushchev. Now it looks as if there is a tension between North Korea and South Korea, and now there is a war. North Korea realized that there is more land other than North Korea, so they invade South Korea. The U.S. don't want them to take South Korea, so they push them back to their original borders. And then they keep going, and they would have almost captured entirety of North Korea if it weren't for the resistance made by the Chinese soldiers, which ended the war the same as it started, which made the killing of 55,000 people almost pointless. North Vietnam gets the idea from North Korea to invade South Vietnam, and the U.S. defend them. Oh, and look, the U.S. put missiles inside Turkey aimed at the Soviet Union, so in a response, Khrushchev placed missiles inside Cuba, which was a convenient place because Cuba at the time had Fidel Castro as its leader. This action creates the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, no one got bombed, but it was a very scary time for all the people in both those countries. And now there's a space race going on. The Soviets make a lot of accomplishments in the space race, like getting the first person ever in space. But the U.S. put someone on the moon, and I guess the moon is worth 10 bonus points or something. Well, the Soviet Union admitted that the U.S. put someone on the moon, which is a blow to the we didn't go to the moon thing, because the space rivals of the U.S. admitted that the U.S. actually did go to the moon. Well, never mind with that. South Vietnam is actually in a lot of trouble. The U.S. sent troops there, and the troops did poorly. And the U.S. lie about how well the war is going, and then a newspaper tells everyone. Now it's a movie. And now the war turns out differently than the Korean War because North Vietnamese capture the South. Oh, and how's China doing? Mao has now died, and many different leaders of the Soviet Union are dying and getting replaced, and there's constantly a different communist ruler. Oh, here's a ruler for at least some time, Gorbachev. Reagan wants Gorbachev to end communism in Eastern Europe, so he makes a speech about tearing down the Berlin Wall. Okay, we can tear that down, but East Germany will still be communist. And then he made it not communist 2 years later. There are still communist states like North Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, and China, which is kind of communist. And fun fact, monkeys are communists because they share their food equally among themselves no matter how much work they did. Oh well, that's all the main communism we can talk about now.